And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Dr. Joseph Tucker, who's a CEO of Enveric Biosciences. Ticker symbol on the NASDAQ is ENVB. Dr. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Hi, Adam. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm excited to chat with you.
So, Dr. Joe, I always like to ask, well, first off, is it okay if I call you Dr. Joe?
You bet. You can just call me Joe if you want, Adam.
Okay, I'll keep it Dr. Joe. How about that? Tell me a little about your story and how you got to where you are today, please.
Sure. So I'm one of those crazy people that keeps starting companies. Sometimes people say they call you serial entrepreneurs. Otherwise, it's because nobody will hire you, and so you have to start a company to hire yourself. But it's funny, my background. I'm a scientist by training, obviously, and that comes from, when I was in university. I actually remember how I got into it. I took this one class when I was thrashing around, couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and I took this one class on was what was it called? Recombinant DNA technology. This is back in the early 90s. And that blew my mind. And I'll tell you why, because it was when people had first discovered that you could modify DNA. And to me, back then, DNA, that's the essence of life. If you can modify DNA, you can essentially change life. And to me, that really resonated. I guess that was sort of my earliest feeling of I really want to change the world. I want to have great impact. So I started down that path. I realized I needed to become a true expert in the field, and that's why I followed the PhD path. But then when I got to the end of that and I'm in my ivory tower, trajectory, and I said, I want to have impact on people. And I had a great mentor who said, what you really want is to be in the biotech industry. That's where you create new treatments, new drugs. You discover things, but you can also apply them to change the world for the better. So that's how I ended up going down that sort of biotech route. And then the other flip side to my personality is I'm somebody that, I guess, how would you describe it? I've lived my whole life with my toes hanging over the edge, on the edge of the cliff, right? I love risk. I embrace risk. It's so exciting for me. And that makes, that's what maybe drives me to become this entrepreneur. But, even as a graduate student, I was a mountain climber. I'm afraid of heights. So how do I deal with it? Go mountain climbing, right? Go straight at it. But those two kinds of things, that sort of willingness to go straight at things that scare me and manage it, right? Manage the risk. That plus wanting to impact the world, that's what got me into biotech. That's what made me a CEO. Every single day I wake up and I'm so excited to be doing what I'm doing. The hair stands up on my arms just thinking about this opportunity to create new drugs and change the world for the better. It's just like so exciting for me.
I absolutely love it. By the way, that serial entrepreneur thing, and I'm going to ask you about risk later. I got a lot of questions here. So, how'd you end up becoming CEO of Enveric, and how'd you get there, if you don't mind me going there?
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. So it was a very fast trajectory once I finished my PhD. I got straight into, and again, being not being risk averse, I started working in small companies right away and taking on great challenges. And when you do that very quickly, you become a senior person in a small company. But I also had a stint very early on as a healthcare analyst. I was actually on the street doing analysis of companies, biotech companies for investors, right? I was a sell side analyst. So that combination of things, propelled me very quickly in the first few years from the time I started. I finished my PhD till the time I was the CEO of a publicly traded, this is in Canada where I'm from, the CEO of a publicly traded biotechnology company was 6 years. It was crazy. But it was all this really want to have this big impact, not afraid to take on challenges, not afraid to take on risks, and just going for it. Those first 5, 6 years, I used to joke back then, of course, that was a long time ago now, it was over 20 years ago now. But I used to joke back then that I was on a curve that was, so straight up that I felt like I was going to fall off backwards. But it was all about taking on these really great, exciting things.
I love it. And let's talk about your company, please, and some of your competitive advantages. What do you do, and what do you want to share with the audience?
Sure. So Enveric is, I think we're doing something really, really exciting. It's a company that we only started the private seed for it about 4 years ago. And within a year, we were acquired by this public company, and it ended up as an asset and ended up taking over the public company. So the public company is entirely about this this new dream, this new line of thinking. So what it is, it was triggered by or instigated by the really exciting work that's been going on the last few years in the what they call the psychedelic sector, right? This the MDMA, the magic mushrooms, the toad, 5-methoxy-DMT, all these drugs that for 50 years have been completely verboten. You can't use these are bad. And in the last 10 years, all of a sudden, actual academic researchers have been doing some studies on them and said, these seem to be really useful for mental health. They seem to have a very potent impact on the brain. And so for the last 10 years, the world has said, we got to take a new look at these. So and enter Enveric, we came at this and said, and it's all about risk management, right? Being a serial entrepreneur, being a CEO of a company, it's all about risk management. We looked at this and said, yes, there's some great potential upside, but there's some risk here too. Right? There's some risk, and we need to manage some of that risk. And so some of those risks are patents. When you're talking about using magic mushrooms or MDMA, it's very difficult to get intellectual property to protect you. So some of those risks have to do with, well, the side effects. These things were made illegal for a long time for a reason. And so how you manage those side effects, how do you get these things approved? So in Veric, our approach, and it's actually been evolving over the last few years to where we are today, which is let's manage away all that risk. Let's create something that's totally differentiated from any other company in the space. And that is to make, in a nutshell, your psychedelic drug non-psychedelic, non-hallucinogenic,
Hey, got
right?
got
Change the molecular structure of this molecule. So it still goes in the brain. It still has these amazing positive effects for people suffering from depression or anxiety or PTSD, but without the hallucinatory side effect, which is where 90% of the risk comes from. So that's what we're doing is we are focusing now entirely on this non-hallucinogenic molecule that's inspired by the psychedelics.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned risk a few times. I'm a big fan of risk as myself. Next, which is a perfect segue for the next question. How do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management?
Well, so I think that here's my view on the world. Life is risk, right? You get out of bed, you put your foot on the floor, you just took a risk that you're going to fall through the floor, right? You go get in your car and you drive to Starbucks, you actually took a really big risk just there,
Big time.
right?
Big
You
time.
took a big risk.
Big
So
time.
life is risk. Now, the market, I'm going to suddenly jump ahead. The market pays you to take on risk, right? That's sure as a CEO, that's my job. But as an investor, it's picking the risk. You get paid. Your big ROI doesn't come from picking blue chip stocks. It comes from taking risky stocks.
Mhm.
And as a CEO, my job is risk management. Every single thing I do has risks associated. You say, well, if you go down this path, here's your risk, here's your potential upside. And if you go down this other path, it's the other, right? So the first thing you got to do is recognize everything is risk and embrace it, right? It's all risk. Embrace it. So what's my job now? My job is to be smart about which risks I take because I said to you when we were chatting earlier, I used to be a mountain climber as a kid. That's dumb risk. I used to do that. And
Right,
I remember the day I stopped.
right.
I'm halfway up a mountain with some friends, and I'm hanging off this edge. Literally, it was one of these three-corner going around, traversing around this edge, hanging off this cliff. And I'm hanging off this thing with 1,000 feet to the ground below me. And I asked myself the question, I said, I've got a wife, I've got kids, I'm not getting paid anything to do this. What the heck am I doing?
Right.
This is dumb. And I finished that climb and I never climbed again. That's dumb risk, right? So how do you handle risk, right? Embrace it, but then take the smart risks, take the smart bets.
I love that, by the way. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So, I had an interview years ago on the show. It was a big money manager, a few billion dollars, I believe. And he said, Adam, you and I, we're not buying and selling stocks. I said, okay, pattern interrupt. He goes, we're buying and selling risk. And I thought that was next level genius. And it's true. So to your point, there's different types of risk, and you want to focus on the ones that give you the highest ROI, the highest reward,
Bingo.
not the ones that give you no reward. So, the smart risk versus dumb risk.
Yep.
Brilliant. Next
You
level.
nailed it. No, you absolutely nailed it. I totally agree.
Love
Yeah.
it. Okay, next question for you, Dr. Joe. What about some timeless lessons you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
So there's a few. I got a few for you. So one of the things is, people make bad decisions when they're scared, right? And so when you're taking on risk, you get fear. So first thing you have to do is take the fear out of it. And again, to give you a climbing example, I remember climbing what were relatively pedestrian, mundane climbs. And when you're top roped, you got a rope above you, and you're not going to fall to your death. Boy, you'll take on all kinds of leaps and jumps and you're fine, right? No fear, you scamper up that wall. And then I did some free solo climbing. Exact same climb. Yes, exact same climb. No ropes. Oh my goodness. You're scared poopless going up that. And all of a sudden, the thing that you just scampered up before, you're terrified of. Your arms are shaking, your hands are losing their, and you're afraid you're going to fall. You're actually more likely to fail when you're afraid, right? You're more likely to fall. So first off, you got to take the fear out of it. And there's, of course, a couple of ways to do that, right? You take a look at what are all the outcomes? Can I handle the outcomes? You can. Pretty much any situation, you take a look at it, you go, yeah, I can handle it. Even if this goes bad, I can handle it. That's one. Another thing, you could be a stoic about it and go all, memento mori and say, hey, pretty soon I'm going to be dead. And it's not going to impact me 100 years from now. Nobody, you can do all of that too. So anyway, first off, the thing you got to do is take the fear out of it. Second thing that I think that I see all the time is that people walk into situations. Everybody does this all the time. I think this is the most epidemic thing there is to walk into a situation, things start to change on you, and you're like, no, my preconceived notions are right. I'm sure they're right. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to bend the universe to my will, right? So the first one or the biggest one, I think, is to be willing to recognize that your preconceived notions are wrong, right? Happens all the time. Nobody wants to admit it. And you need to go in and say, things are changing under me. Because here's another one. Here's another, Marcus Aurelius, to quote another Stoic, right? Life is constant efflux. It's constantly changing. I'm getting older. My house is getting older. The mountains over there, they seem timeless, but they're either growing or they're eroding, right? Everything is changing. I'm going to die. I'm going to turn into dirt. Dirt's going to be grass, whatever. Constant change, constant efflux. That's true in any situation you walk into. So you walk in saying, I know how to do this. I know the answers. And then it doesn't start to work. As soon as that happens, you've got to not just bang your head against it, but you got to figure out, okay, I didn't come in with the correct answer. How can I get the right answer? And again, people will come in and say, gather input. Yes, by all means, gather input. Go to smart people. Think about it. Yes, all those things are true. But the other big one is to be creative, right? You run into something like that. Your preconceived notion, first off, you have to admit to yourself your preconceived notion was wrong. The next thing you have to do is be creative. That's, I think, how you solve most problems, how you handle risks, how you back yourself out of mistakes. One of the ways that I find is most effective for me personally is I look at other folks in the same situation. And it's actually it's pretty easy for me to do that as the CEO of Enveric. I know who my peers are. They're facing a lot of the same challenges. And I watch them in the market and I see them do stuff and I say, what did you just do? You just had an amazing success. And going into it was poo-pooing what you were doing and suddenly kaboom, huge success. So I'm constantly looking to see how other people solve it. And the ones that I especially like are the ones that blow my socks off. The ones where I said, there's no way that's going to work. You're a fool. And then it shoots the lights out. So constantly be looking for stuff that's super creative and try to figure it out from other people who've succeeded, right? Other people have done this. They thought a way you didn't think and it worked. Try that.
Absolutely love it. I think that's really, really fantastic. I got a lot. I love what you said about how people, when they're fearful or that highly emotional state takes over, they're making subpar decisions. I love what you said about the fact that people don't like to admit they're wrong. We all have biases. What do you do there? So, in my book, Psychological Analysis, the whole point of it in one sentence is to learn how to make rational, not emotional decisions, especially with your money, when the emotions are running high. People are emotionally attached to their money. So, the fact that you're aware of that and you're observing that in real time from running the business, and you also worked on Wall Street, so you kind of see things from a 360 view, which most CEOs don't, I think is fantastic. And then you're looking at doing next generation mental health, which is essentially what the basis of what you're doing here is. I think it's really, really, really fantastic. I'm really excited to learn more too. I want to go in different directions, but I also want to stay on course here. When you Let's talk about the science for a second, if you don't mind, so the audience understands. People come to you, what you're trying to do with the psychedelics is say, hey, listen, there's the negative side here, which is the hallucinogenics, and you can go off the deep end type of a thing, but there's a lot of good there. So they have mental health issues, and what you want to do is risk reward, remove the negative risk of the hallucinogenics, but keep the reward as much as possible for the combating the mental health. Is that a good way of tying in what you're saying here with life lessons and risk management, but for the actual science?
Yeah, I think that is a great way of putting it, Adam. And I guess that's because this is my personality. This is who I am. It's how we approach this, right? You're absolutely right. With when you got the psychedelics, which I don't consider us to be a psychedelic. I consider us to be developing. And there's a new term for it. It's only the last couple of years. Neuroplastogen, right? Neuroplastogen meaning creating neuroplasticity, which is your brain rewiring itself. So when people were first looking at psychedelics and they said, "How is this working?" Not how does the shaman say it's working, because we know how he says it's working.
Right.
But actual like brain scientists, when they said, "How is this working?" and they look at the brains and they go, "Wow, the things are actually rewiring themselves." The people that have these mental health issues, they got this region at the front of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And it's a really important piece of the brain. It says it's new. It's like mammals. I was going to say mammalian. And it controls this ancient piece of the brain, the amygdala. So the amygdala is this ancient thing that says, oh, outside stimuli, that's bad. Stop, run, get scared, right? And it does, as you probably would have guessed, creates emotions, because emotions cause you to take action. Emotion causes motion, right? So it creates this emotion, you take action, you run away, whatever it is. That's the amygdala. It's a really important part of the brain. We're here because of it, right? When you hear a bad noise and we run, it's probably saved our lives. However, prefrontal cortex is this much newer piece of the brain that actually goes, oh, hold on. That scary noise, that was a TV show you were watching. You don't need to run out the door screaming, right? And it puts this cognition. It says, your boss got mad at you. It's not a life or death situation. Right? So this prefrontal cortex. So these two regions of the brain are in this balance going on. And in people that are suffering from PTSD or depression or anxiety, they're not talking the way they're supposed to. And so what psychedelics, what neuroplastogens do is they get those two regions of the brain to strengthen the connection between them.
Okay. That makes
right? And that strengthened connection, now they get back into balance. They act the way they're supposed to. So
mhm.
this is what brain scientists have recently figured out. Nothing in what I just said, and you have to hallucinate or it doesn't work, right? No. So when you go and say, wait a minute, I don't have to hallucinate. The shaman says you do. But the CNS science, the brain science, are like, I don't see anything about hallucination in here. Uh, all of a sudden you say, is that a risk I can remove? Right? Can I climb these stairs or do I have to go straight up the side of the wall? I'm going to try the stairs, right? So how about you remove that risk? So that's how we're coming at this. We're like, get rid of that hallucination, take away that risk. And by the way, it's a really big risk, bigger even than people were thinking a few years ago. Not only is it that a lot of people don't want to experience hallucination to start with, not only is it very expensive if you have to go through it that sort of hallucinatory way, because you have to go in and have healthcare workers watching out for you and be in this controlled room. Not only is there the risk that you'll actually have a bad trip, which is why they have to control all this stuff, but we just saw a month ago, really recently, the FDA, the very first psychedelic agent, got to the FDA and they turned it down for approval. And they turned it down because they said, when you're hallucinating, the patient knows they got the drug. Can't fool them. And so a patient who's, let's say, depressed, patient is depressed and they go take a clinical trial and they're like, I've been dealing with depression for 10 years and it's ruining my life. And I'm so excited that there's maybe a drug that's going to help me. And they go into the trial and they take it and they know that they're supposed to hallucinate and they don't hallucinate. Guess what happens? They're more depressed.
Yeah, they get worse.
Right? Well, they're more depressed
Yeah.
because they know they didn't get the drug,
Right.
right? Or they go in and they hallucinate. They go, yay, I got the drug. They're less depressed. So the FDA says, we need to know, is this just that they know they got the drug? And they can't tease that apart with
Mhm.
psychedelics.
Right.
But if you do what we're doing and you eliminate the hallucination, now the patient goes in, they can't tell whether they got it or not. Now you've got something the FDA can work with. So there's so much risk. While it's super exciting, everything that's been done in the psychedelics to date,
Yeah.
there's just so much risk. Let's clear away that risk and give this a real chance. And then it can be big, right? Then it can be really big.
I love it. So the neuroscience or the neuroplasticity behind it, so people understand in the audience, is that we've recently learned that the brain kind of changes itself based on your thoughts and based on your experiences and based on that fight flight, all that kind of fun stuff. There's a lot more chemical variables than what I just mentioned, but the idea is that the brain's constantly changing itself for the better or for the worse, however, but it's changing itself. So what you're looking at is using plastogen, is it plastogenic
Yeah,
or
neuroplastogen is the
plastogen?
name for the molecule that causes neuroplasticity,
Got it.
the brain to rewire.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that explanation. All right, back on track here. I just wanted to get put those pieces together. Net timeless mistakes. So what are some timeless mistakes you want to share with the audience that you've learned from? How do you avoid those mistakes? Anywhere you want to go.
Well, as I said before, the biggest one is this not walking into a situation realizing that your preconceived notion is probably wrong. Right? Because everything is in constant change. Everything you had. So actually, market theory is great for this, right? The whole idea of efficient markets theory is you can't look at the market and say, when this happens, the stock goes up. So I can now get in front of that and make money. Everybody on the earth also knows that too, right? So every time you figure out a trick, it immediately stops working because everyone else figures it out too, and they're all in front of you, right? So it's the same kind of a theory, is that anything that you walk in with, it's based on the information you had yesterday, but today is today. That was yesterday. You're stepping in a river, the river changes all the time, right? That's what it is. So that preconceived notion, not walking into every situation with the opening thought of, I'm probably wrong, but let's see what happens and let's react accordingly. Let's gather more information. Let's see somebody else who's solved this. Let's try that. Right. I think that is probably the biggest one. You just see it everywhere. And so that is that I think is how you want to handle like any kind of a mistake, any kind of situation. Walk in looking to yourself and say, we're probably wrong here. Deal with it, right? Just deal with it. Make an improvement and just constantly improve, constantly improve.
Absolutely love it. So, as a CEO, let's talk about leadership. What makes a
Mhm.
great leader, and what are some lessons you've learned about leadership that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I guess I kind of think of two things when I think of leadership. So the first one is, and this one is great because CEOs almost by definition are egomaniacs. I mean, that's how you get there is by walking around saying, I have all the answers, right? So the first thing that I always do, and that I think everybody should do, is remember that everybody out there is better than you at something, which means everybody's better than you, right? But so everyone out there is better than you at something. And so your goal as a leader is to find the people that are better than you. They all should be better than you at a particular function, a particular need, and put them in that spot, right? Because your goal as a CEO, as a leader of an, I'll just say a leader of an organization, any organization, is to help that succeed. And the way it succeeds is by having the very best people with the greatest skill in particular area of expertise that you need and have them in those spots. So that's the first. Everybody is smarter than you. Find people that are smarter than you in each of these niches and put them in it. That's the first thing. The second thing, and treat them accordingly, right? These people are all smarter than you, better than you. You should be very respectful of all of these folks that have, deigned to work for you, work with you, when they're really much better than you are at some area that still somehow falls under your umbrella as the CEO, as the leader of this whole thing. So treat them with respect, treat them accordingly. So that would be my first. The second thing is, and this is the almost the flip side to that, but this is one of those balances that all leaders have to deal with. The needs of the organization are constantly changing, right? I talk about life being a constant efflux. Well, everything is. And organizations are constantly changing. So what that means is you have to, as a leader, it's on you to recognize when the needs of the organization are changing and to make changes accordingly, right? And if that means you can support people that you have and they can grow into it, great. If not, if somebody is no longer the right person for the job, then you have to find the person who is. That's the other thing is we get as leaders, there are people use the metaphor of it's a family and people use the metaphor of it's a machine. And the thing with the family is that's a tough one when you've grown to a place where one person or whatever certain people don't have the skill sets that you need as a company and the entire organization suffers if you don't resolve that. So it's important to remember that in those cases as well.
Yeah, I love that. I actually had another CEO on biotech company from Israel. He said, to your point about finds people that are smarter than you and people know more than you. He used a great analogy. He goes, I'm a conductor in an orchestra. He goes, the conductor is not the best violinist or the best pianist or the best singer, whatever. The conductor knows how to put all the pieces together, get the people that are experts in each one of those things together, and you got a beautiful orchestra. And that's just how it works as being CEO. I thought that
Yeah,
was
that's a
excellent.
that's a very nice metaphor.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that one.
Okay, so next question for you. Let's talk about adversity. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles you had to overcome, please?
So, yeah, adversity is kind of like risk come true.
I love that. I love
Right?
that.
That's
It's so good.
that's kind of what it is. So, well, the first thing that I do when I deal with obstacles, this is a great sort of retrospective approach that I have to life. And I'm one of those people, I constantly journal and look backwards and look forwards all the time. And so one of the things that I've noticed, and again, we're talking about adversity, so it's no longer risk, it's now risk come to life, is all the greatest things that have ever happened to me in my life. I, I can look backwards and find the adversity that made that happen. And it's the same in business. It's the same in, one of the great first investments that I made that completely failed and went delisted and the whole thing. You know what I did? I contacted that company. I contacted the transfer agent and I got my share cert because it was no longer worth anything. And I framed it and put it on the wall.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It was like a constant reminder, right? But so first off, remember everything that's great comes when you hit an adversity and you have to find a way around it. And it's what you do next that takes you to the next level. So I actually love adversity. It means I'm about to have a breakthrough of some kind, and I'm going to leap up a whole level. So that's the first. The second one is I think you have to assess an adversity because sometimes it's mostly in your head, right? Or you think it's huge, but with a little this or a little that, it's actually not that big of a deal anymore. So that's the next thing, right? Is you got to assess just how serious this is. And then the third thing is, and I think that this is what this adversity is. This is a signal to change your tactics, right? Or if I can use a metaphor that we've been kind of touching on here and there, it's a signal to change your tack. So I look at life, I look at what you're doing in business, what you're doing personally, what your company's doing. All of it is you're trying to get somewhere and it's not working. The adversity is it's not working, right? If you didn't, going back 10 minutes in our talk here, if you didn't walk into the situation saying, I'm probably wrong with my opening thought here, if you didn't come in with that, you went far enough till it became adversity and you actually hit your head on the wall. That's the universe saying, that's not working. Try again, right? And we go back to what I said earlier. Yes, gather input, but the biggest one is to take a look around and see how are other people doing this and as creative as possible, right? As outside the box as possible, that's actually probably where your answer is, right? And in fact, I think Marcus Aurelius, the obstacle is the way, right? You find the obstacle. That obstacle is what teaches you the way to get where you're trying to go, right? They're the best possible things. Obstacles are opportunities to go to the next level.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Even Carl Jung talks about that with making, incorporating the shadow and the unconscious conscious and all that fun stuff. Brilliant. Absolutely love it. All right, final question for you. What is the best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Sure. So this one, and I have some kids, and I have given this exact advice to my kids, but I would have given it to myself. And that is, it's really one thought, one metaphor, which is you have to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, doesn't matter which road you take, it won't work. Right? So you have to know where you're going. Constantly assess that, reevaluate that. I have a book over here. I have my goals. I have my company goals. And I constantly pull it out and look at it and go, is this right? Should I change this? So first off, you have your goal. Second, constantly assess it. But every time you have a goal, have a plan from today all the way to that goal. From here all the way to getting there, have a plan, step by step. Because when you do that, you will be surprised. Things will come up. Situations will arise. And if you didn't have this plan, you would have driven right on by. Like, I didn't even see it. But when you've got the plan, suddenly you go, oh, that was step 2. It's right there. I just got to accept this phone call and do what this guy says. And suddenly this thing that I had in my book that I was going to do 6 months from now, I do today. You'll see things. What's the Confucius thing? When the student is ready, the master will appear.
Teacher shows
Right?
up, master. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you actually have to know what it is your path is. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, it was right there. It was happening. So you need to do that. And then going back to our sailing metaphor, right? When you think of somebody sailing around the world or sailing, Columbus sailing across, what you've got this ship. The ship, by the way, is constantly falling apart. You're having to sew new sails and spars are falling over the side. The ocean is moving in this direction, and then it's moving in that direction. The wind's going from here, and then it's going from there. You've got all these factors. Whatever, you're here and you're going there. Adjust, right? Adjust. Keep tacking, adjust your sails. Remember where you're going. Look at your map. Okay, that's where I'm going. Keep adjusting, right? If Columbus could make it, why didn't everybody before Columbus not make it? They didn't believe they could. They thought they'd fall off the end of the earth. If anybody has done it before, you can do it. Whatever it is, keep your goal in mind, keep adjusting yourselves. That's my life lesson.
I'll give you a standing ovation. That was absolutely fantastic. So if you don't know where you're going to go, you never get there. I love that. Somebody gave me a line one time about the Yellow Brick Road in Wizard of Oz. So you have Wizard of Oz, and then you have to come up. That's where you want to get to, and then you got to get that Yellow Brick Road to get there. Otherwise, you'll never get to Oz. I love that also. And then adjusting the sails. It's like the 4 minute mile. Like nobody ever ran the 4 minute. All of a sudden they did, and now everybody runs a 4 minute mile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Gosh, there was a really funny one that as a kid, I remember going, do you remember that book, Charlotte's Web?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So as I recall, Charlotte, the spider, had a friend, the pig. And there's this one line in it where it says, nobody ever told the pig that pigs can't climb fences.
Right.
So we did.
Yeah.
Climb the fence. Right. So it's just another one. Once you know you can do it, and all you have to do is adjust your strategy, you'll get there.
Love it. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to speak today. People can learn more by going to your website. Do you want to share anything along those lines?
Yeah, so www.enveric, ENVERIC.com. That's where you'll learn about what we're doing with neuroplastogens, which I think is a hugely de-risked way to get to this major unmet medical need for sure. So enveric.com, and our ticker symbol is ENVB.
Beautiful.
On the NASDAQ.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon. This was fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Adam. It's great to have this chat with you.